Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive in. I'm just going to turn my camera off in case it's messing with anyone's internet speeds, and we'll start here. Okay, so today's presentation is on paraphrasing and citing because these are very important skills that you're going to need for all of your assignments in your English course. This is a critical skill, paraphrasing, that you're going to want to practice and develop as the term goes on. And so what we're going to look at specifically today is paraphrasing practice and the skills for good paraphrasing. So what we'll talk about are the steps to take in order to write a good paraphrase. So we do have a step-by-step method that we recommend that you can try out. If you want to try it for yourself, you'll be invited to do that during the presentation as well. So you might want to grab a pen and paper or open up a Word doc for that. We'll also talk about how to cite a paraphrase because that is a necessary step in paraphrasing as well. You do have to include a citation with that. We'll talk about when to paraphrase versus when to include a direct quote in your writing, so kind of what the purposes are of one versus the other. And then we'll also talk about how to get in touch with the library and tutorial services for those times when you have a question, whether it's about paraphrasing specifically or citing, or if it's about writing in general. We do have help services available to help you with the questions on all of those topics. So just before we dive in, one more thing with today is this session is meant to complement the paraphrasing activity that's been embedded in your Moodle course. And so what you learn here today will directly correlate with that activity. And so if you want to, after doing this one, you can go to your Moodle course and use this directly in there. So to start off with then, what is paraphrasing? So paraphrasing is when you take content from a source, and that could be any kind of source, and you put it in your own words while keeping the meaning the same. And so this allows you to integrate other sources into your writing. So you can find ideas on a website or in a scholarly article or in a book. You read those ideas and then you rephrase them in your own words. And then that way it doesn't interrupt the flow of your writing. It's written in your own way of saying it. What paraphrasing is not then, it's not a direct quote. And so a direct quote is a different thing. So if you are copying the author's exact words, right the way that they put them, the exact same, that's a direct quote, and that's a different thing. We'll talk about sort of when to use paraphrasing versus when to use a direct quote later on in the presentation. Paraphrasing is also not changing one or two words in the sentence, but otherwise keeping the sentence the same. That's not paraphrasing either, right? That's changing one word. A lot of people try to do that, and it's not good paraphrasing, right? Good paraphrasing means that we're rewording the whole sentence into our own way of saying it, or the whole passage. You're not just changing one or two words. So what we're going to look at today is how you can paraphrase in 6 easy steps. And so this is a method you can follow when you're trying to figure out how you want to say something that you've read in an article or a book in your own words. And so, of course, step 1 is to read the article or the passage or the book or whatever. Read the section that you want to paraphrase. Step 2 is to reread actively. And so what we mean by active reading is that as you read, you're highlighting or underlining the main points, or you're taking quick notes. And so you're jotting down the most important concepts that you want to include in your paraphrase. Step 3 is to put away the article and also put away your notes. And this stops you from leaning on the article or your notes too much to write the paraphrase. We find if people don't put it away, they tend to end up copying the words too much. So this is a good step to take, is just set them aside for now. You are going to come back to them. Step 4 is to write down what you remember. And so because you're not looking at the original and you're working from your memory, this makes you a lot less likely to just copy word for word from the original source. You're more likely to put it in your own words. Another way to think of this might be if you were explaining this to someone else, what you just read. If you were telling someone else about it, what would you say? And so this could be in point form, even at this point, or you can put it in full sentences, depends how your brain works. Step 5, you've got your little paraphrase that you come up with based on what you remember. You're going to now go back to those notes, go back to the original if you didn't make notes, and you're going to check for accuracy to make sure that you're adequately and accurately representing what the author meant, that you're not misinterpreting or wrongly indicating what the author has said, that you're being accurate, and to make sure that you also haven't inadvertently borrowed any wording, that you haven't copied a particular phrase. And so that's what we're doing here in step 5, we're checking. And then step 6 is to make sure you cite your source. And so even paraphrases have to be cited to avoid plagiarism. So even though you're using your own words, because the author came up with the original idea, you still have to give that credit. If you want to know more about in-text citations, I'm going to talk about them now a bit as far as they pertain to paraphrasing. But if you want to know more, this is module 3 in the APA online course, which should be in your Moodle course. The third part of the APA goes into detail on in-text citations. And so if you've already done that, this should be ringing a few bells. If you haven't done that yet, I recommend do that one. It will really help you with this citing in your paraphrasing as well. So for that particular step, for that 6th step for the in-text citations, I'm just going to go over here briefly how to write those citations for the paraphrase. And so when you're paraphrasing in your own words, all you have to include is the author and the date to cite from that source. So for example, if this is the journal article that I use, so this is my reference for a journal article, what I'm going to put for that would include the last names of the authors. So I would put Crocker and Smith. And then I would also put the year of the article, which is 2019. And that's all you have to include when you're paraphrasing. It's just the author, last names, and the date. If you run into a scenario where you have 3 or more authors, in that case, we're going to write the name of the first author followed by et al., which means and everybody. So you get to take a little bit of a shortcut in those cases, and I've included an example here. In this case, this example I've given you only has 2, and so in that case, we're going to write both names. And if you can't remember this later, don't worry about it. This is all in our APA guide on our website, all this information on in-text citations, which I will link to you at the end of where to find that if you're not sure. So how you can include that author and date information, you have some flexibility here in terms of how you want to put those author names and the date into your paraphrase sentence. So here are 2 examples for how you can do that. The first way is include the information in a narrative style. And what that means, when I'm saying narrative, it means I'm talking about the author. So in this case, I would put Crocker and Smith, 2019, emphasized, and then in my own words, what did they emphasize? What did they talk about in that part of that article? And so this is one method you can use, is by talking about the author and talking about what did they say. A second choice is to put the information into parentheses or to do a parenthetical in-text citation. And so this is where I take the information that I've paraphrased, and then at the end of the paraphrased information, I put the names of the authors and the date into parentheses, and then the period comes at the end of that sentence. In terms of which one I should use when, this is totally flexible. If it's very important for your instructor or whoever is reading your paper to know who said what, then I might use more of a narrative style. If the author's name is not very important, though, if it's not critical to the understanding that I know who the author is, then I could definitely use parenthetical. Generally, we recommend mixing it up. Use a little bit of both when you're writing. It helps to have a little bit of variety in there. This is not an exhaustive list, though. You could put the author's names in the middle of your sentence. You could give a little information and then include their name and then give a little more information if you structure your sentence that way. It's up to you, really. If you want to see examples, again, in our APA guide, we have tons of examples of how to include the in-text citation in a sentence, because you're by no means limited to the beginning or the end. You can put it lots of places in between. All right, so now this is your opportunity if you wish to practice the skill right now while you're learning it. And so we're going to take a moment. I'm going to give you a passage. And if you want to follow those 6 steps of paraphrasing, we're going to go through them and have a little bit of time to practice this skill. So if you need to gather anything, gather it quickly. And we're going to go ahead and get started with this. So this will take us only about 5 minutes, beginning to end. So if you see the passage there in the box, if it's not big enough, on the left side of your screen, you should see a little page with a magnifying glass. You can use that to zoom in on this slide if the box with the reading is too small. So here's a short passage on confidentiality. It's taken from a textbook. I'm going to invite you now to do 1 and 2. So step 1, read the passage. Step 2, read the passage a second time. And I'm going to give us about 1.5 minutes to do this. So go ahead. Okay, so we read it through 2 times. Step 3, if you made any notes while you were reading, which is an option, put them away. I've put away the article. for us. So now, based on what you remember having read those 2 times you read it, write down 2 or 3 sentences that you feel really paraphrase or sum up that information that you just read, and I'll give us another minute to do that. Okay, so here's the passage again. So now check what you wrote against the original to make sure that it's still accurate and that you haven't accidentally taken any direct words from this, that you haven't copied any phrases. So just take 1 minute here to compare what you wrote against the original. Okay. And then last but not least, we have to put an in-text citation on the paraphrase we just made. And so either at the beginning, if you want to rephrase and have the author's names included, or at the end in parentheses, we're going to add an in-text citation to this paraphrase that we've written. So here's the citation information for this passage from the textbook. Keep in mind, we've got 3 authors. So in this case, remember, we get to use that et al. Shortcut. So we just need to put the first author, all, and the year in order to write our in-text citation. So I'll give you just a few seconds to add that. Okay. And that's all there is to it when it comes to paraphrasing. So this is something where, because there's so many ways to write that information, there is, of course, a need to practice, and of course, there is no specific right answer as well. So that is something that there's quite a bit of flexibility involved with. And so one of the final things I want to look at today before we throw it open to your questions, if you want to ask them aloud, I know people have been putting questions in the chat as we go. But one of the last things to look at is paraphrasing versus directly quoting. So when should you be rephrasing using paraphrasing, and when should you be putting in the author's exact words? So why we want to paraphrase is because it demonstrates to the person reading your assignment that you understand what you read, right? If I can read it, if I can rephrase it in a way that still makes sense and that still captures that essence of the author's idea, that demonstrates a high degree of understanding. It also allows your writing to be smooth, to flow, because we're not interrupting constantly with quotes, right? We're not breaking up our writing that way. If we're able to flow our ideas together in our own words by paraphrasing from others. In terms of how often you should paraphrase versus direct quote, paraphrasing should be used about 80% of the time. So you want to be mostly paraphrasing in your writing. Direct quotes do have their use though. Direct quotes are very useful when you need to emphasize an idea. So when you want to put a heavy emphasis on something an author has said, or if you need to express that information in a very precise way. So another way of thinking of that is when it's important, not just what's being said, but how the author is saying it. If their word choice is as important as the concept they're expressing, that's a great time to use a direct quote in your writing. So if we're looking at percentages, you want to be using these maybe 20% of the time, just for those important emphasis moments in your writing. So like I said, we have resources when it comes to paraphrasing and to citing your paraphrases that you may want to refer to as you work. One way to get help is through the library. And so this includes help with research, citation, and accessing sources. So if you need to find materials for your assignment, as you move through your assignments in your course, you'll find you're asked to incorporate other sources. We can help you to find those and to evaluate their quality. Also available to help you is the tutorial services department, and they focus specifically on writing skills. And so the librarians, we can help you with some things like paraphrasing, which is technically also a writing skill. But if you want to form a thesis statement or brainstorm an assignment, a writing tutor is your best bet. They're very aware of those things. They also, if you are having trouble understanding a grammar concept, they're good to help with that. If you're just having a hard time getting started on a written assignment, they talk about that process of how do I generate ideas, how do I get the ball rolling. And then when you get to the end of your assignment, they can teach you how to proofread. Important to know, neither the librarians nor the tutors will do your homework for you. We also are not able to proofread for you. And so what that means is you can't hand us your paper and we won't fix it for you. Please come prepared if you want to talk with either group. Online is how we're able to be accessed right now. Our physical space isn't open yet. So these links will take you into our physical, or rather our online options. Come prepared with questions, because that is the best way we can help you, is if you know you have a specific question. So for example, with paraphrasing, if you came with a question like, okay, I have this article, there's a passage in here, I'm not totally sure what the author is saying, can you help me to understand, and then I can try to paraphrase it. That would be something we could help with. Or if you have a source and you're not sure who the author is of that source, so you're not sure how do I paraphrase when I'm not sure who the author is, we can help you with something like that, right? A specific question. And then before we go, I just want to show you guys the online APA guide on the library website. So I'm just going to bring that up here for you as well, because as I said, there's tons of paraphrasing samples inside of that. And so let me just switch over to the library. Okay. So this is the library website that I'm starting from. So that's library.norquest.ca. And then on the library website, if you scroll down, you'll see this quick links. And this is the most useful library services buttons, as I like to think of them. And so online services will let you get in to see a librarian online. If I click on tutorial and academic coaching services, that takes me to see the writing tutors. And if I click on APA citation and format guide, that will take me in to our APA online guide. And so from here, if you want to know more about paraphrasing and in-text citations, check out the in-text citations tab, because this has some explanations of how to write in-text citations paraphrases as well, a whole section on paraphrasing, as well as other types of in-text citations. So for example, if you have an image that you want to cite in text, or if you want to put in some direct quotes, there's instructions here for a whole bunch of different options in terms of in-text citations. So that's the end of the formal presentation. And so now if you have questions, Sarah will continue answering them in the chat. And otherwise, if you want to speak your question aloud, I invite you to do that now as well. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and I'll answer them as they come up. Otherwise, if you feel like you're good and that you understand everything and you want to go, you're also free to go. Don't forget, you do have the library paraphrasing activity in your Moodle page. And so that is your next step with this paraphrasing concept, is to complete that activity. And then from there, moving on to working on your assignments. All right, so feel free, if you have questions, pop them in the chat or open up your mic. Otherwise, have a great rest of your Monday, and we will see you all in, I believe, a couple of weeks for the next concept in the library session series, which is looking at different types of sources that you're likely to find when you search library tools. All right, have a great day.